Welcome to this training session, and my name is Hannah Rose. I am an occupational therapy student and am also the family ministry intern from Noblesville First United Methodist Church. And here's just a layout of how this session is going to go. We already did the introductions, and a requirement from the Methodist Church, we have to do a safe sanctuaries training. All volunteers and all church staff members have to go through this training in order to work with children and youth and children with disabilities. So we will be going through that. And then I will provide you some education on children with disabilities, and that education content will cover behavior management strategies, communication techniques, and sensory integration approaches. And then we will get into the details of Respite Night. We will go over the schedule, the activities and stations we have planned, and the COVID precautions that we're going to be following. And then we will have a specific time set aside for questions, and then a final wrap-up time as well. And so now a little bit about me. Like I said, I'm an occupational therapy student. I attend the University of Indianapolis. I'm currently enrolled in the Doctor of Occupational Therapy program there. I am in my third and final year there. I'm actually in my last semester, so I see the light at the end of the tunnel. I will graduate in May and plan to take my boards in June and hopefully pass those and then become an occupational therapist and get a job after that. Like Sam said, I went to Ball State with her, and my undergraduate is in special education. And I never practiced as a special education teacher because I went right into occupational therapy school after my undergraduate degree, but I do have my teaching license in special ed, K through 12, mild and intense interventions. So now here is that training that all volunteers have to go through. Need you to bear with me through this because it is a 2-hour training that is going to be condensed into 15 minutes. So I'm going to hit the highlights of it. I'm going to be reading from a script for it to make sure I get all of the essential components. And some of the content is repeated because the most essential points we want to make sure that you guys understand and that it is drilled into everyone's mind on what is most important. And at the end of the session, you guys will be able to ask any questions about the policy. And then on Respite Night, I will provide you guys with a piece of paper that you guys will all sign, indicating that you did complete this training and that you are qualified to work with these kiddos. So I will get started on this training part. And the entire policy is online at noblesvillefirst.com/safe sanctuaries if anybody wants to look at it. And there is also a hard copy at the church that I would be more than happy to get for you guys if anybody is interested in that. So why exactly do we need safe sanctuaries training? God has called us to make our ministry safe, protecting our children, youth, and vulnerable adults from abuse and exploitation. God has also called us to create communities of faith where children, youth, and vulnerable adults can be safe and grow strong. Jesus taught us, "Whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me." And that's from Mark 9:37. The social principles of the United Methodist Church state that children must be protected from economic, physical, and sexual exploitation and abuse. At each child's baptism, we affirm our responsibility to their safety by our congregational response, pledging, "Building on these foundations, we recognize that our faith calls us to offer hospitality and protection to all children, youth, and vulnerable adults, as well as to those who are committed to ministering to them as volunteers and employees." Every 15 seconds, a child is abused or neglected. Often, the abuse occurs in places where children and youth feel safe, such as homes, schools, camps, and even churches. In over 3/4 of reported cases, the victim was related to or acquainted with the abuser. In light of this, the church has seen fit to outline policy and procedures that can, 1, prevent such abuse from happening in our church, 2, be a place where children can feel safe in disclosing abuse, and 3, protect the loyal volunteers and employees who administer to children, youth, and vulnerable adults. So before we talk too much about policy specifics, I have some definitions that I'm going to go over with you guys. You guys might already know these definitions, but I have to read them to you. The first one is abuse in general is harm or threat of physical or emotional harm to a child or vulnerable adult by a parent, guardian, or other person. Abuse includes the infliction of physical or emotional injury by other than accidental means, the creation of a risk or allowing the creation of risk to a child by other than accidental means, committing or allowing the committed of an act of sexual abuse, sexual exploitation, or prostitution upon the child. And then there's different types of abuse. Physical abuse is violent, non-accidental contact that results in injury. This includes, but is not limited to, striking, biting, or shaking. Injuries include bruises, abrasions, internal injuries, fractures, cuts, and burns. Sexual abuse is any form of sexual activity with a child or youth, whether at the church, at home, or in any other setting. The abuser may be an adult, an adolescent, or another minor. Emotional abuse is a pattern of intentional conduct that crushes a child or youth's spirit and attacks his or her self-worth through rejection, threats, terrorizing, isolating, or belittling. And exploitation is obtaining or using another person's resources, including but not limited to funds, assets, appearance, likeness, picture, or property by deception, intimidation, or similar means, with the intent to deprive the person of those resources. Okay, any questions on those definitions? No. Okay. We're getting through the policy. Here's some more definitions on population and children's age. So a child is anyone age 11 or under. So we will have children at Respite Night. Youth is children between ages 12 and 18 who have not completed high school. So we will have children and youth at Respite Night, but we will not have any adults because those are individuals who are 18 years of age or older and who are not in high school. And we will not have any vulnerable adults because those are individuals who are 18 years of age or older, and because of a mental or physical dysfunction are unable to manage their own resources, carry out the activity of daily living, or protect themselves from neglect, exploitation, or hazardous or abusive situation without assistance from others. So everybody at Respite Night is 17 years of age or younger. So they do not qualify for that. And then there's more definitions on age. So the only ones that apply to Respite Night are elementary and youth. And elementary is K through 5th grade and youth is 6th through 12th grade. And the only two definitions on this slide that apply to you guys are screened adult and supervisor. And a screened adult is an adult who has gone through the Safe Sanctuaries training, which is what we're going through right now. And the screening process, which you guys all completed the background check, and who works with children or youth. And then a supervisor is one who oversees or directs a ministry or activity. And then you guys are all counting as a supervisor because you're going to be overseeing the activities when you're working with the children. And these are the ratios that the church requires when adults are working with elementary, youth, and vulnerable adults. So for elementary, there must be at least one trained adult for 10 children and youth. For the youth, there must be one trained adult for 12 children and youth. And for vulnerable adults, there must be one trained adult for 5 children and youth. However, for the Respite Night, my goal was to have at least a 1-to-2 ratio, if not a 1-to-1 ratio, meaning one volunteer for 2 children with disabilities or 1 volunteer to 1 child with a disability. And for the most part, we have a 1-to-2 ratio and one person is 1-to-1. Regan, you are the one who is 1-to-1. Everybody else has 2 people, 2 kiddos. So that's pretty good. So we're doing even better than the church is requiring. So pretty pleased with that. Any questions so far on the policy? We're about halfway through the policy, guys. Okay, emergency contacts. A list of emergency numbers will be accessible to all adults supervising our event. So I have 2 binders that I've created, one for volunteers and one for participants. It has everybody's medical information and emergency contact numbers for each person in alphabetical order. And I also have emergency contacts for the local police, poison control, and child protective services. all in that binder. And if at any point in time you feel like you need an emergency number for a volunteer or for a child, please come find me and I can easily get that binder out. So the open door policy, transparency is an important part of building trust when supervising those who are vulnerable. An open door policy will state that parents and guardians of children, youth, and vulnerable served, clergy on staff, and professional staff of the church have the right to visit and observe ministries, activities, classrooms, or church-sponsored programs at any time unannounced. They must maintain discretion. These individuals may not supervise nor be left alone with any children, youth, or vulnerable at any time. The restroom policy is youth and vulnerable adults who identify as gay, lesbian, or bisexual are to use the restroom of their biological gender. Any youth or vulnerable adult who identify as transgender are able to use the restroom of their preferred gender. If other participants or parents, guardians have an issue with this policy, the church family ministry operations team will do its best to reasonably accommodate the participants and parents, guardians to ensure that they feel safe and comfortable. The doors and windows. All classroom and office doors will have a window or visibility from hallway or remain open while occupied. Windows will be kept free from adornment and kept locked. The only one this one applies to is we're going to have a sensory room and we'll just keep that door open at all times. Individual counseling, one-on-one interactions are sometimes necessary and appropriate. This is not to be confused with professional counseling. Care must be taken so that these interactions are conducted in an environment that provides visibility by other adults, while also providing privacy for the child, youth, or vulnerable adult. When possible, individual counseling will take place in an area of the church that contains cameras. Another adult will have knowledge of the staff member's whereabouts and with whom they are meeting. Children, youth, and vulnerable adults receiving individual counseling will be told they are free to discuss any aspects of the counseling process with a parent or other adult, especially if they are uncomfortable about anything that occurs in counseling. All incidents of suspected abuse and neglect revealed during the session will be reported following the abuse response process. Okay, boundaries. Children, youth, and vulnerable adults will need comfort and encouragement. Touching should be initiated only by the child, youth, or vulnerable adult, and the adult response will be within the guidelines of safe sanctuaries training. It should not be based upon the adult's emotional need, but on the present supportive need of the children and youth. A child and youth's preference not to be touched will be respected. Church workers and volunteers are responsible to protect children under their supervision from inappropriate touching by others. No physical punishment or verbal abuse are to be used at any time. If isolating the child or youth within the classroom or removal of the child or youth from the room becomes necessary, the situation will be discussed with the child's parents or guardian as soon as possible. So this would not necessarily apply unless there was a challenging behavior that were to occur, which I will discuss challenging behaviors later on in the training session. And if that situation were to occur, we would contact the parent immediately. And church workers must promptly report inappropriate touching or other questionable behavior by other workers to the appropriate supervisor. And gifts, nobody is to give gifts to individual children, youth, or vulnerable adults without prior knowledge of the parents or responsible clergy. Gift giving can be a form of buying loyalty or silence. And there wouldn't be any reason for gifts to occur during the respite night. The only thing that would be considered a gift at respite night is each child is going to receive a superhero cape when they arrive at respite night. But every child is going to get that, so nobody's going to be left out. Any questions on that slide? That was a lot of info.
Hannah, can you talk about who they should report things to if something came up and they needed to talk to it or talk to someone about it?
Are you talking about like who they would report, like coming to me? Is that what you're?
Yeah, coming to who they would need to go to report it.
Yes. Yep. That was coming up. Yep. If you suspect anything out of ordinary, or if you think anything fishy is going on, immediately come contact me and we will take the necessary actions. Don't go contact anybody else. Don't talk about it with any other volunteers. Just immediately come contact me and we will take the appropriate actions.
And Hannah, I know you talked about the restroom policy, but during the respite night, if one of the kids needs to use the restroom and needs help, how will that go with the volunteers?
With the volunteers, the children that do need help, Did you guys see on the sheets whether they do need assistance or not? Have you guys looked at your cheat sheet?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I would say that if we could switch like with the male volunteer assisting the men in the bathroom, that would be most appropriate.
So there just one person that assists, or does there need to be a second person?
Right now, we only have one male. I would think that if we had another male outside and kind of kept the door cracked so they could hear what was going on, that would be appropriate.
Okay.
And the restroom is going to be down the hall, which I will show you guys when you arrive on respite night. So the restroom is not immediately inside the room that all the activities are going to be in. So you would need to take the child to the restroom down the hall. So there would need to be a switch of children, or to take the children to the room, and the other volunteer would need to go with them, with the male child. If that makes sense. Okay. So supervision of children and youth. So all activities involving children and youth will be supervised by 2 trained and screened, unrelated, non-cohabitating adults. So all of you guys fit that category because you're going to be trained and screened. And the 2-person rule means that there must be at least 2 trained and screened, unrelated, non-cohabitating adults in any classroom or setting. And we're going to have that covered in all scenarios because we're going to all be set up in one large room, and there are going to be multiple volunteers in that room. And then if you and your child go to the sensory room, we're going to have a church staff member set up in that room at all times. So we will always be abiding by that 2-person rule. So that will be covered. And if for some reason the church staff member in the sensory room needed to go to the bathroom or needed to get a drink, we have what is called a rover, which is the next bullet point, which is someone who would check on that sensory room periodically and unpredictably. They would just go back and forth unpredictably. You don't know when they're going to come, just to make sure that everything is okay, check in on everything that's going on in that classroom to make sure that things are going smoothly. You wouldn't be able to predict when they're going in there. And they would do the same thing in the bathroom as well. And then the sign in and out sheets, those are going to be when you first walk in. Those are going to be for both caregivers and volunteers. You would provide your signature and the time of when you arrive and when you leave. That's just to keep everyone safe and just to provide a head count of everyone. Okay. We'll skip through this part. Kind of give the answer. So does anyone remember for the elementary what the requirement was for the church? For how many children could be supervised by one volunteer?
10.
Good job, Sam. I still remember your voice from 3 years ago. I can't see you on my screen.
Yeah, you don't want to see me right now.
Okay, the youth. Does anybody remember the youth?
15.
You're close. It's 12.
Ooh.
Okay, and then vulnerable adult.
Is it 5?
Yeah, good job, Regan. So, and like I said, for respite night, we are beating these numbers. We are having a 1-to-2 ratio and a 1-to-1 on some, which is awesome. Okay, this is the last one. We are almost there. Okay, the response plan. This is kind of what Allie was talking about when she asked who would report to, what the action would be. So a quick, compassionate, unified response to an alleged incident of abuse is expected. All allegations will be taken seriously. In all cases of reported or observed abuse, there shall be cooperation with all official investigating agencies. Reporting is required by any staff or adult ministry servant who personally witnesses an incident of abuse or exploitation when an allegation of an event of abuse or exploitation is made to staff or an adult ministry servant by a third party, and or when a child or youth or vulnerable adult discloses abuse or exploitation to staff or to an adult ministry servant. It is crucial that reporting be immediately and the allegations dealt with as soon as in time to the incident or disclosure. Any media request can be directed to me, and I'll direct it to the appropriate person. So kind of like I already said, just come immediately to me, and I'll take care of the rest by following the proper process. If someone is accused of abuse of any kind, they will be asked to leave immediately. This will allow us the space needed to process the situation in the correct manner. When it has been alleged that a member of the church staff or any volunteer member has committed an act of abuse or exploitation, the staff member or volunteer shall be required to refrain from all ministry activities or events with children or youth until the incident has been fully resolved by the appropriate state, federal, or local authorities and in accordance with the Book of Discipline. So basically, the main thing to remember is that if you see or hear anything unusual, anything at all that concerns you, just let me know. We'll take care of it from there and keep you informed of what steps you need to do next and any steps that need to be taken along in the process. So you have officially completed the training. Congratulations. That was about 18 minutes, I think. A lot better than 2 hours. So are there any questions on any of that training? I know we had a few during it, but does anybody have any other questions related to that? And like I said, at Respite Night, I will provide you guys with a piece of paper that you guys can sign, just indicating that you did complete this training and that you are Safe Sanctuary certified, and you are good to go to volunteer at any church function here at Noblesville First, and especially with Respite Night. So I will get that taken care of in a couple of weeks. Okay, if there aren't any questions, we will move right along. Okay, now to the fun stuff. Alrighty, so we already talked about your guys' past experience working with kiddos with special needs. Some of you do have experience, some of you have limited experience, so we kind of have a wide variety, which is good. We can all learn from one another, and we can grow and expand our knowledge, which is awesome. And some of you may know, and some of you may not know, but children's brains process information much differently than ours do, especially children with disabilities. They are wired differently than us, they function a lot differently than us, and they just perform a lot differently. However, they are still human beings that have natural needs that need to be satisfied and fulfilled, just like you and I have needs that need to be satisfied and fulfilled. So it's very important that we take the time to get to know them for the human beings that they are. And by taking the time to get to know them for who they are, we can support them, we can love them, we can learn to communicate them, and that'll just allow them to grow and develop in a comfortable environment that we can then support their needs even better. And that is kind of the goal of the Respite Night, is to get to know these kiddos through this training session and through you guys looking at that cheat sheet. So then when we go into Respite Night, we feel more comfortable and more prepared to meet the needs of these kiddos, to then have a more enjoyable night for everybody involved, for the kids, for you, for the caregivers, for everybody. And another concept I want to talk about is that there are numerous conditions, diagnoses, disabilities that exist in the world today. One example of this is Sam, the child that you have. I had never heard of her diagnosis. I don't know if you looked at the cheat sheet, but I had to look up her diagnosis because I had no idea what it was.
Yeah, I haven't heard of it either, but it looks similar to like fetal alcohol syndrome. But yeah.
Yeah, it said it was deletion of chromosome 8.
Yeah, I don't know, but it's more of it's a rare disability than what's common in the classroom, I feel like.
Yeah. And this just goes to show that we can never know too much about a person or their disability type or their condition. And some disabilities are physical. We can physically see them from the outside. And Haley, the girl that Sam has, her disability is physical. We can physically see it. So the child may be in a wheelchair, they may be missing a limb. There's a wide variety of physical disabilities. And some disabilities may be more invisible. They may have an emotional disability. They may have a cognitive intellectual disability or an emotional disability, which are more on the inside. They're hidden. You can't really see those disabilities until you get to talk to the individual or watch them more for an extended period of time. And also, one single disability can impact a child in a variety of ways. So, for example, autism. You'll hear me talk about autism a lot throughout this PowerPoint because a lot of the kiddos that have registered for Respite Night have a diagnosis of autism. That's a pretty common one. So I want to provide a lot of examples of autism just to increase our familiarity with it. So autism, for example, can impact a child in a variety of ways. It can impact their cognition or their intellectual capabilities. It can impact the way they respond emotionally. It can impact their behavior, their social skills. It can impact them in numerous ways. It's also important to not make assumptions on a child's disability. When you see the word autism, that a child has autism, it's important to not automatically assume X, Y, and Z about that child because that child could perform a lot differently than another child who has autism. Just because two children have autism, they may perform and have completely different functions than the other child. If you would assume that they performed the exact same, that would be kind of similar to assuming that two identical twins are going to walk the same, talk the same, think the exact same, respond to situations identically, and that would be incorrect. That would be doing the two twins injustice. So it's important to not make these assumptions based on a disability label or category. It's important to get to know the person for who they are. And that's basically what these past two slides are saying, is that we really need to get to know the child for who they are, get to know them for the human being that they were created to be. This next slide is, I love graphs, I love charts, and I love numbers. So I wanted to make sure I put a chart in here. This chart is from the school year 2018-2019. It was the latest statistic that has been published by the National Center for Education Statistics. And just because a child has a disability does not mean that they're automatically going to receive special education services. Their disability has to negatively impact their education in order for them to receive special ed services in a school setting. And this chart just shows the number of students who received special education services in different disability categories. So for example, when looking at this chart, the most number of students received special education services under the disability category of specific learning disability. And specific learning disability is kind of an umbrella term, and conditions under this category impact a child's ability to learn, speak, write, think, do math, all of those different functions that you need in order to perform well in school. And then speech or language impairment, we don't have any kiddos that have that, have a lot of difficulty with speech or language impairment that are going to be in Respite Night. We have a few kiddos who use an iPad to communicate. I think it's just one. But speech or language impairment, those have difficulty processing speech, pronouncing words, and expressing themselves. Other health impairment, the most common condition in that category is ADHD, and those children have difficulty being alert, focusing, they have difficulty with strength and endurance. Autism spectrum disorder, a lot of kiddos, like I said, at Respite Night have a diagnosis of autism. It can be called autism spectrum disorder, ASD, you may hear it, any of those terms. And these children, most likely have difficulty with behavior and social skills. But like I said before, they all can function differently, and we need to view them for the person that they are and get to know them. And I want to go down to intellectual disability, because that's another common one that a lot of the children that registered for Respite Night, a lot of the kiddos have Down syndrome. That's a common condition that falls under the intellectual disability category. And these kiddos have a below average intellectual capabilities. So those are the main categories that children are receiving special education services for in the year 2018, 2019. So that's just a brief kind of definition on some disability categories. And now I want you guys to kind of think about an experience, a personal experience you may have had, or maybe you saw in public or saw on a movie of a child acting atypical. Maybe they were covering their ears with their hand, maybe rocking back and forth in a chair, or maybe they went a little more extreme and maybe they shoved their sibling down. Kind of a continuum of different behaviors, but try to reflect on a situation where you saw a child engage in one of those behaviors. Does everybody have a situation in mind? Give you a minute to think about it. It's late. Our brains are starting to turn off. Okay. So hopefully everybody has one. And I know from an outsider perspective, if you don't really know the child and know what their behavior means or what the situation was that maybe caused them to engage in their behavior, or even if you do know what the situation was or you are familiar with them, at some point in time, it is easy to become frustrated at them for misbehaving. Sometimes it's easy to define it as misbehaving, but we are going to learn quickly that really is not misbehaving, because there is a reason for them engaging in that behavior, and it's not misbehavior. But it's easy to become frustrated at the child for engaging at that behavior, and we can easily make false assumptions. Some of those false assumptions may be, oh, that child is aggressive, that child is angry, they have anger issues. Sometimes people may even think, it's easy to assume that, oh, their parents didn't raise them right, their parents don't know how to control them. Those are just some of the assumptions that can be made. But it's very important to try to be cognizant of what we're thinking and not jump to those conclusions, and also not to scold the child when they start engaging in those behaviors, because one, the child may immediately shut down and just completely shut down in the entire situation, not want to do anything else at all. And it also may escalate the situation, and then even more challenging behaviors may occur. And I want us to try to alter our thinking. Um, if we do catch ourselves thinking and making those assumptions, that to try to switch our mindset to thinking that there is a reason for the kiddo to engage in this behavior. They're doing it for a reason. They are responding to either an experience or a situation that happened, and it's causing them to respond in that manner. And there's always a cause for a behavior. Just like with you and I, we do something, we do Y because of X. We just don't go to the fridge for no reason. We go to the fridge because we're hungry, or we go to the fridge because it's dinner time, or because it's 6 o'clock if some of us eat on set scheduled times. We do things for a reason. We don't usually just do things for no set reason at all. So I want us to switch our mindset to try to grasp this concept that kiddos engage in these behaviors for a reason, and behavior equals communication. This is in bold because this is a main point that I really want us to try to get out of tonight, that behavior equals communication. When kiddos engage in these behaviors, they are trying to express a want or a need to you. They are trying to communicate something to you. And we need to figure out exactly what it is and why they are trying to communicate this to us. And the quicker that we understand the why and the what, then the sooner that we can respond to their needs and satisfy those needs, and then teach them how to more appropriately communicate those needs to us. Does anybody have any questions on that? No questions? Okay. And here is just kind of a little quote that I found that reiterates the information I just said. Okay. And now here is another example where we can kind of put ourselves in a child with special needs shoes. So I'm going to have someone try to explain what they would do. So can I have a volunteer? I'm going to ask for a volunteer before I explain I'll explain what it is first before I have a volunteer. So I want you guys to picture you're sitting in your house and all of a sudden you realize that there's a bird trapped in your house. And I want you to say how you would respond. Hopefully it's a wild response. That would make my story. Anybody want to say how they would respond? You can even use my examples provided on the screen.
I had one trapped on my porch once, and I tried to flap at it to try and get it to go towards the door. And I also tried whistling to get it to come to the door. Neither worked. Neither worked.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing, Allie. That's kind of what I was picturing when I was preparing for this, like flailing arms, maybe screaming, yelling. That's kind of what I was picturing. So thank you.
I would running and get a broom or something and
Yeah.
try not to hurt it, but try to get it out. So it'd be
Yeah, flailing around.
Mine aren't birds, they're squirrels.
What?
Mine aren't birds, they're squirrels.
Oh, I should have squirrels trapped in the house. Yeah. Okay, so that's pretty much exactly what I was picturing. So yeah, you're running around your house, flailing your arms, screaming. So from an outsider perspective, if you didn't know the situation, you could easily make an assumption that that person is irrational. What are they doing? Maybe they're wow, that person is being aggressive. But in reality, from your perspective, you're reacting to a situation. You're reacting to the bird being trapped in your house. Just like a kiddo with a disability, they're reacting to a situation. We don't know what that situation is. Maybe they're reacting to a light being too bright or their clothing being too tight, or we don't know what their situation is. But you're reacting to the situation, and you flailing your arms is your form of communication, and that's your behavior, which is your communication. Just like the kiddo with a disability, their behavior is their communication. And as soon as I figured out that Allie's flailing her arms and yelling at the bird was her communication and call for help, then I could help her. Just like with the kid with disability, as soon as you figure out that their behavior is communication, then you can help them and meet their needs. Does that example help clarify some things and kind of understand how behavior is communication? And when we recognize what the behavior is and how that's communication, we can satisfy some needs.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I don't know how I thought of a bird, but I don't have birds in my house, but okay. And although their behavior is a form of communication to you, it's not always going to be appropriate. Like I mentioned earlier, there is a continuum of different behaviors, covering your ears with your hands, rocking back and forth, those aren't necessarily as inappropriate, but there are more inappropriate behaviors such as shoving a kid down, kicking or hitting. Those are more inappropriate behaviors. And the more inappropriate ones or difficult behaviors, those are what we call challenging behaviors because those are more difficult to manage. And some examples of these challenging behaviors are kicking, hitting, running, screaming, biting. And based on the caregivers' responses, I communicated with all the caregivers, and based on the questions that I asked them and their responses, none of the kiddos really have challenging behaviors except for running. We have a few kiddos who run, and we will specifically talk about running here soon. So we need to find a way to help modify these behaviors, these challenging behaviors. In order to do that, we need to look at what is causing them or what is the trigger. And the most common trigger for the challenging behavior is a disruption in the child's sensory system. And these may be lights being too bright. Is it too loud in the area? Clothing may be too tight. It could be a variety of things that are disrupting the child's sensory system. And we need to try to figure out what it is. So I have a little video. There's no sound, but it just provides some visualization to go along with what I'm going to say. So I'm going to kind of play it and talk about it as I go. But we all have 7 sensory systems. And so you and I have 7 sensory systems. Kids with disabilities have 7 sensory systems. We all do. And they are touch, smell, so touch or tactile, smell, vision, hearing, sound, auditory. Those are all the same. Did I say vision? Not for sure. Vision, vestibular, which is movement of your head and knowing where it is relative to gravity. And proprioception is where your body is and compared to space. So those are the 7. And let me play this video. That reviews the 7. Okay. And the goal is for all of our 7 sensory systems to be balanced. And you and I, most of our sensory systems are naturally balanced and in proportion with one another. When we receive sensory input, our body can naturally process it, and it knows how to interpret the information and how to process it naturally. But kiddos with disabilities, they sometimes have difficulty processing the information and knowing how to interpret it. And their sensory systems, when they're off balance, they're either over responsive or under responsive. And so under responsive, I want you to think of it as under responsive as the sensory system being a large cup and the sensory input being water. So I'm going to specifically use the sensory system of sound because a lot of the kiddos that are going to be at Respite Night have difficulty processing sound. A lot of them are over responsive, which we'll talk about in a second, to sound. So pretend that the sound or auditory system is the large cup, and the sound input is the water. So you have a large cup and you're going to need a ton of water to fill it up, but it's never going to seem like it's satisfied. It's never going to fill up. So these are the kids that can blare the music and it never seems to hurt their ears. They can take a ton of sound input and they're never going to be satisfied. And in contrast, you have over responsive, which is a tiny cup with water. So these are the kids who are very sensitive to sound. These are the ones that we'll see a lot of them at Respite Night. They are very sensitive to sound. All it takes is a little bit of sound and they're satisfied. If they get too much sound, if all it takes is a tiny bit of water to fill their cup. If they get too much water, it overfills very, very easily. So these are the kids that you may see covering their ears. They wear headphones a lot. A lot of the parents indicated that this sensory system is over responsive for their child. So you will see that on a lot of your guys' cheat sheets. And so the goal for all of the sensory systems is we all want our cups to be filled to the top, but not overfilling. When they overfill, that's when our sensory systems are disrupted. And then that's when we have the chance for kiddos to engage in challenging behavior. And also, just because one sensory system is over responsive, another one could be under responsive. They all don't have to be in the same category. So it's important to get to know the child and know what sensory system is under responsive and what sensory system is over responsive, because they're all going to be different. Does anybody have any questions on sensory systems? Kind of a complex concept, I think. It's very fascinating, I think, how our body interprets and processes that information and how some people can process it regularly and how it's overwhelming for others. I think it's very, very interesting. I think that video did a good job of comparing it to cups. Okay. So exactly how do we get to know this information about the kiddos? How do we find out what triggers them, how their sensory systems function and operate? Well, the best way to get to know this information is 1, communicate with the caregivers, or 2, work with them over an extended period of time. And you're probably thinking, well, how am I going to do either of those options? Because I'm going to meet these kiddos for the very first time at Respite Night. Well, what I did, I talked with the caregivers, with each caregiver for each child, and I asked them to identify triggers, and I asked them to identify information related to their sensory systems. And that information is on your guys' cheat sheet. So if you look at this example right here, I did Haley. So Sam, this is one of the children that you were paired with. So for example, triggers right here. The mom specifically said, I tried to use some quotes that the parents said. So her mom said that she sometimes doesn't like loud noises. So then I put that she's over responsive to sound. So this child may benefit from headphones, or she may even wear her own headphones to Respite Night. Some of these kiddos, if the parents know that they don't like sound, they typically will probably already have their own pair of headphones, if that's something that usually bothers them. And same thing, another trigger, flight risk, which is another word for, which we'll get into in a minute, is another word for being a runner. So flight risk, runner, elopement, those are all kind of words for a child who likes to run. So she may wander off at times. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But those are just some examples of how I tried to include some of the triggers and some of the sensory information in your guys' cheat sheets. Any questions on that? Okay. So we're going to talk about preventing some of these challenging behaviors from occurring. Because the best way to manage behaviors is prevention. Preventing them from happening in the first place and being proactive is the best approach that I've learned through my schooling. So one way that we can prevent challenging behaviors from occurring is to keep the children engaged in the activities as much as possible. Because if the children aren't engaged in activities, they're going to be bored, because the activities provide them with a variety of sensory input, whether they're getting the tactile, the touch sensory input from bouncing the ball or banging on the drums, or they're getting auditory sensory input from hearing the drums beat or the maracas shaking. Whatever kind of sensory input they're getting it from their engagement. And when they're not engaging in the activities, they're lacking that sensory input. So they're going to find a way to get that sensory input so their sensory systems are not disrupted. And in order to receive that sensory input, they need another activity to engage in. And that activity is likely going to be a challenging behavior. So, how do we keep the children engaged? We can get to know them, ask them questions, find out what they like, what they don't like, what they're interested in, what makes them who they are. And when we ask them questions, we want to ask them yes, no questions. We don't want to ask them open-ended questions because some kiddos may have difficulty responding to those open-ended questions. When we provide them with a prompt and they know that they can respond with a yes or a no, that reduces some stress and anxiety and increases their ability to engage in that conversation. Another way we can increase engagement is by modeling or demonstrating the task and activities when we go to the different stations. Some of the kiddos are going to be shy. A lot of the parents indicated that they may not initiate conversations or initiate task in a new environment. So this last bullet point is going to be very important. With you guys being volunteers, it would be very beneficial when you get to a new station to first model and demonstrate how that station works. You could be like, hey, come on, this is how you do it. And you could show them, like, we're going to have a parachute. You could show them how you shake the parachute, or you could show them how you bang on the drums, because a lot of them may be hesitant. They may not know exactly how to do it, or they may not want to make a mistake. They may not want to be the first person to do it. You know, in class, we never want to be the first person to raise our hand and answer the question wrong. So same thing with these kiddos. They don't want to be the first person to do it and mess up. So by you being the model and showing them how to do it, it just reduces some of that stress and that fear of them being the first one to do it. So another way to prevent challenging behaviors is to avoid overstimulation. There's going to be a lot going on. We are going to be in one large room, and we're going to be taking measures to avoid overstimulation just by keeping the noise level down. And I can do that I'm going to have a microphone. And if I feel like the noise level is getting too high, I can come on there and say, okay, we need to keep the volume down. And you guys can do the same as volunteers. If you feel like your child is getting a little excited or wound up, you could just remind them, hey, we have a lot of friends in here. Let's try to keep our volume down. And we also could limit the options that you provide your child with. So when you walk into the room, you will see a lot of stations all set up. And when your child first sees that, maybe they're going to be really excited and really when they see everything that they have to do. That could be one option. That could be their initial response. Who knows? But another response could be very overwhelmed. They could be very overwhelmed with all the options that they have. And something you could do to prevent that from being so overwhelming is, instead of saying, so what do you want to do? You could say, do you want to play with the balls, or do you want to play with the drums first? And limiting the number of options that they have still allows them to feel like they're in control, because you're still giving them choices, but it limits the amount that they have to choose from. It's kind of similar to the yes, no question. You know, you're providing them with prompts, but you're not leaving it open-ended so they have everything to choose from. And a lot of the kiddos that registered for Respite Night are older. We have some 15-year-olds, some 17-year-olds. So they're also not going to like being told exactly what to do. So I wouldn't recommend, telling them, okay, we're going to go play balls. We're going to go do our craft now. So by giving them options gives them that sense of autonomy and independence as well, which is very important for them later on transitioning into adulthood as well. So that's very important too. And it's also important to stick to a schedule. I emailed you guys the schedule for Respite Night, and I'm also going to provide you a hard copy when you guys arrive. a lot of the kiddos will like routine. They will like knowing what's coming up next. And especially if they see you pull out that schedule at any point in time during respite night, they're going to be wondering probably what is that you have in your hand. And they may want to see what's coming up next in the schedule. And that's perfectly fine. I would show them, what's coming up next. I would even tell them, at 7:15, we're going to be washing our hands. And I'm also going to have a microphone during the night. And at 7, I will come on and say, okay, 15 more minutes. And then we're going to wash our hands and prepare for snack. And then at 7:10, I'll come on and say, okay, finish up your last station. We have 5 more minutes and we're going to wash our hands and prepare for snack. So it's those subtle cues and those transitional cues that really make the big difference, because the uncertainty, I can't talk, uncertainty is what scares and provides fear for some of the kiddos. I like knowing what's coming up next. I'm a very type A person. Schedule keeps me on track and keeps me in line. And if I didn't have a schedule and didn't know what was coming up next, it would really throw me off. And same thing with these kiddos. They will want to know what's coming up. And even when you're transitioning between activities, you could even provide subtle transitional cues like, okay, 5 more dribbles and then we're going to go to the next activity. Or how about you put 3 more stickers on your craft and then we're going to go to the drum station. I think those will make a big difference, especially because we want to keep the flow of the night going, just because it's very important that we only have about 2 groups per each station, just because we want to make sure that we're not having too many people at a station at a time due to the COVID guidelines that we're following. And I'll get to that in a few slides with the number of people at stations and so forth. But those transitional cues are key. And sensory breaks. I already kind of talked about the sensory room that we are going to have. So the majority of the night will take place in the large room. It's called Celebration Hall. And we also are going to have a sensory room that is going to be down the hall. And these are for kiddos who may get overwhelmed, overstimulated from everything going on in the larger room. And in this sensory room, we are going to have some sensory equipment to help balance out those sensory systems that may be disruptive. And some of the sensory equipment I'm going to talk about on the next slide, but we're also going to have a swing, some bean bags, some exercise balls that they can bounce on, and some sensory bins, just to help provide a calming and relaxing area for them to unwind and de-escalate. And we also can provide some fidget toys, and this provides extra touch and tactile sensation for those kiddos who are under responsive for touch. And this just helps increase concentration and focus. And this would be very beneficial, especially during the movie time, for kiddos who have difficulty focusing on that. And all of this equipment is going to stay in that sensory room. We don't want to keep it out in the main room because we don't want any of this stuff to be seen as toys, because they are specifically tools for sensory needs only and not toys at all. So if at any point in time you think you need any of the sensory tools, come find me. And also, if you do need to go to the sensory room at any point in time, come tell me too. Please don't just go to the sensory room, because I want to try to know where everybody is at all point in time and kind of keep a head count. And because we also want to make sure that we are abiding by that 2-person rule. So I want to make sure that the staff member is in that room as well. So like I mentioned, these are some of the sensory tools that we will have, along with the beanbag and swing and so forth. So I just talked about the fidget spinner, and these are wiggle seats. We only have 1 wiggle seat, so we want to make sure we are preserving it for any children that really need it. And so the wiggle seat will be very beneficial if a child has difficulty staying seated for a long period of time. It will increase their focus and their concentration. It would be most beneficial for children if they choose to stay seated in a hardback chair during the movie instead of transitioning to the floor during movie time. And it's good for children who are under responsive with proprioceptive input, and it allows them to move forward and back and side to side. It also increases their core and trunk strength as well. And then on the right side, this thing looks like a T. It's made of rubber. And these are for kiddos who need extra oral input. So they're under responsive for touch, specifically oral motor. And Sam, I think your child may benefit from this. Haley. Her mom said that she tends to put a lot of objects in her mouth.
Yeah, I think it's such as pica.
Yeah, so she might benefit from this.
Okay, cool.
So these kiddos, you may see them sticking their fingers in their mouth a lot, chewing on clothing, or sticking any objects in their mouth. So this just provides the extra oral input. And then we've already talked a lot about the headphones. So these are kiddos who are over responsive for sound. The sound is too much for them. They can only handle a little bit of sound. Okay, we also want to be sure that we are supporting the child's communication as much as possible. And like I mentioned before, the kiddos have a wide variety of communication at Respite Night. Most of them can communicate verbally, but some of them utilize an iPad to communicate. So it's important that we try to clarify the message that the children are saying to us as much as possible. So if a child is communicating with you, maybe you will only be able to pinpoint or pick out a specific word that they're saying. And if that's the case, you want to try to elaborate on that word as much as possible to try to expand or grow what they're saying to try to meet their needs. So, for example, if a child said a whole sentence to you and maybe you could only interpret food out of it, you could ask them using the yes or no questions. Are you hungry? Do you want food? Can I get you food? Just trying to elaborate on that and see what they need and try to help them as much as you can. And that kind of goes along with providing supportive language when they can't provide the words on their own. And for kiddos who don't have much verbal language at all, they may use gestures. I know Regan, your child, David, their caregiver said that sometimes he pulls on people's clothing or gestures a lot to communicate. So, but then that he does use words eventually. So if he engages in using gestures initially and you can identify what he's talking about, that's when then you could then elaborate on his gestures and provide the supportive language when he can't communicate initially using verbal language. So if he was pulling on, trying to pull on his snack, and to then support his language, you could ask him, do you want this open or do you need help? To try to model that communication for him, to try to then, since he does have verbal communication, to try to get him then to maybe say help or yes, or to try to get him to then communicate with you verbally.
Yeah, okay.
And some children have greater receptive language than expressive language, meaning that they can interpret almost everything, if not everything, that we are speaking to them, but that they have difficulty taking what their mind wants them to say and getting it out of their mouth. And just think how frustrating that would be if you knew exactly what you wanted to say, but just couldn't physically get it out of your tongue and out of your mouth. So some kiddos may have a lot of frustration when they're trying to communicate with us. So it's very important that we do try to provide that supportive language when possible, if we are able to understand what they're saying to us. And repetition is very important too, because some of these kiddos have intellectual disabilities or their cognition is impacted from their disability. So if you're explaining a task or assisting them with something, it's okay to be repetitive and tell them, like if you're making your craft and you want them to put the sticker there, you could tell them, put the sticker on, sticker on. Repetition is okay because some of them may have difficulty with their short-term memory or difficulty comprehending the task. So sometimes less is more and repetition is key. We don't want to use big elaborate sentences and trying to explain something. Short and sweet is good. Keep it simple is what people always told me. So, and also a lot of you may see on your cheat sheet that some of these kiddos may not ask for help, specifically when going to the bathroom. I think there's a couple kiddos that don't ask for help when they need to go to the bathroom. So I think it's very important that maybe every half hour you check in with your child. Hey, do you need to use the restroom? Because we want to try to prevent accidents from happening as much as possible. I'm going to have some backup clothing items, but I'm not necessarily going to have an extra shirt and shorts and socks and everything for every single child. So it's important that we check in with the kiddos and try to encourage them to go to the bathroom and at least check in with them. And I also would recommend maybe at 7:00, we all try to, or maybe stagger it, 6:45, some people go to the bathroom, 7:00, some people go to the bathroom, to all kind of get in at least one bathroom break during the night. Because your child may repeatedly say, no, I don't have to go to the bathroom. No, I'm fine. And because they're having so much fun, they don't want to, hopefully everyone's having so much fun. That's the goal, right? They don't want to miss out on the activities. So maybe they'll just repeatedly say no. So I encourage you to get your child to go to the bathroom at least once a night. And some things the kiddos may not ask for help is one, they may not be able to identify when they need help. Maybe they're not aware of their capabilities or inabilities, and they don't know that they need help. They may also be shy. A lot of the parents said that when they're in a new environment, they may be timid and may not open up as easily and as quickly to the task at hand or the individuals that they're around. It's a new environment. It's a lot of stuff going on at once. So they may not ask you for help right away. And they also may have difficulty initiating conversations. So I encourage you to just ask them, do you need to go to the bathroom? Do you need help? Because it may be unlikely for them to just ask you right away if they need help. So by you asking them and providing that prompt with a yes or no format, they'll be more likely to respond appropriately. Okay, timers. I know those who have taught as teachers before, timers are, or have experience working with children with disabilities, timers are almost your best friend. They are very beneficial. They provide a visual. They also provide the sound of it going off. So this is going to be very beneficial for two types of children. And also because we also need to follow these COVID precautions, and we don't want to be chasing after a child if they don't want to stay in activity for very long. So the two types of children that these timers will work great for at Respite Night. One, the child who wants to do every single activity for 2 minutes each. So say your child wants to play the drums and they bang on the drums for 2 minutes and then they want to go make their craft. And they put 2 stickers on the craft and then they want to go dribble the balls, or they do 2 dribbles on the balls and then they want to go do something else. Well, you have to clean all of those items. You will be spending your entire night cleaning instead of actually doing activities. So that's going to get really old really fast and you will be exhausted after 20 minutes. So I recommend you using a timer. You can pull out your phone. I have a timer going right now to make sure I don't go over my time. So you can pull out your timer and just say, so once that happens, you'll catch on real quick if your child is doing this. You could pull out your timer and say, okay, we're at the balls now. I'm going to set my timer for X amount of minutes. I would recommend like 5 or 10 minutes, because if your child is doing this, probably 5 or 10 minutes is going to be the max that they're going to want to stay at a station. And okay, once I'm setting my timer for 5 minutes. Once the timer goes off, we can go to the drums or whatever that next station is that they want to do. This is just good because it provides a visual. They may want to keep looking at the timer. Okay, how many more minutes do I have? How many more minutes? And that's okay. They may want, if they want that, that's fine too. At least they're staying at a station for that time. And then in contrast, you have the other child who maybe loves sports. He could stay dribbling that basketball for the whole hour that we have for activities, which is great. You're only going to have to clean one basketball. Good. That's good for you. But it's not really fair to the other kiddos who may also love basketball, because we only want to keep 2 groups at a station at a time just because of COVID. Because then that's about 4 people at a station at a time, maybe 5 if there's 2 kiddos per volunteer. So if that's the case, if you have a child that is like that, I would do the same thing. You know, okay, we've been at the basketball station for a while. I'm going to set a timer for 5 minutes, and then we're going to go move on to the other station. Or you could also do, if it's like 6:30, you could say, okay, at 6:30, at 6:40, we're going to go to this station if they can tell time and have higher cognitive capabilities. Any questions on anything so far? We all good? Okay, moving right along. Okay, another way to prevent challenging behaviors. If you're catching on, there's a lot of ways to try to prevent challenging behaviors, because that's key. Try to prevent them. So we can provide praise to the children. Who doesn't like praise? Who doesn't like hearing good things about them, what they're doing good? In the world that we're in right now, it's easy to hear negative things. So praise is good. And when we are providing praise to the kiddos, we want to provide behavior specific praise. So we don't just want to say, good job, or well done, or I like that. We want to specifically say what they did that was good. So instead of good job, we could say, I really like the way that you sat quietly at your table while you were watching that movie. That was an awesome job. Because now you told them exactly what they did, so they know exactly what behavior that they should keep engaging in, and they're more likely to do that again. And that will just reduce challenging behaviors because they know what behavior is positive, and you're focusing on the positive behavior. And we also can encourage peer interactions. I know it's kind of hard right now with COVID and social distancing and wanting to keep that distance between everyone. But at Respite Night, we can still focus on socialization and building relationships. One way to do that is between you and the child. And even though it's not with same age peers or between 2 kids with disabilities, it's still important for that child to build relationships between individuals that they're not usually around. You know, these children are most likely around people that they see at school and then family members. So they're still improving their social skills by interacting with you, which is very important. And socialization is critical for their development now and later on in life. Social skills and play are very, very important for a child's development. And you can also help develop their social skills if there's another group at your station that you're with. You could help model conversation between you and the volunteer and you and the other child when you're working together as a group at that station, while still maintaining that 6-foot distance. You could model conversation and try to facilitate that conversation between the 2 children. So now we're getting onto the runners. This was the challenging behavior that the parents said that some of their kiddos had. And similar to the other challenging behaviors, the challenging behaviors most likely and typically occur when the child is bored. So as long as no one's bored, right, no challenging behavior should occur. We just got to have everyone having fun and engage in the activities. That would be ideal. So when a child is bored, that's when they're most likely to engage in the challenging behavior. And specifically talking about running, that's when they're going to wander off. And even if they're not necessarily running and darting away, they may wander off, they may wander into the hallway. And kind of one way that we're going to try to prevent this is we're going to have areas blocked off, whether that be with doors being shut, with tables sectioning off areas where kiddos can't go. And we're also going to have people specifically set up in areas to help monitor areas where kiddos can't go as well. So that's how we're going to kind of prevent that from happening while also trying to keep them engaged in the activities as well. And when a child is running, they are most likely running to something or running away from something. And that all kind of goes back to trying to identify the trigger as well, which we already talked about with talking with the parents and the sensory system. So it all kind of goes full circle back to that. And if you do find yourself chasing a child, one, hopefully you have tennis shoes on, and two, call for help, because it's better to have two people. In case a child darts in a different direction, you could have another person there to help you. And it should be easy to have two people around because we're all going to be in one large area for the most part. And if you are in that second room, there is going to be another person in there as well. So there should always be another set of eyes that we should see if a running situation does occur. And also, when a child does run, these children typically have difficulty with transitions. And so that's when they become frustrated and get overwhelmed. And that's when they then run away from that situation. And I kind of already touched on some of this information. So some ways that we can assist with transitions are, one, provide visuals. And one way to provide the visuals are if they want to see your schedule. Some are visual learners. They like to know what's coming up next. And since I said a lot of these kiddos only have mild and moderate disabilities, so they may be able to read and interpret the information on the schedule and know what's coming up next. So they like to visually see, okay, at this time we're doing this, and then at 7 o'clock, this is what's coming up next. And then also making announcements before transitions. That comes along with me coming on the microphone and saying, at 7 o'clock, it's 7 o'clock, we're doing this, 7:15, we're doing this. So I will provide those transitional cues. And like I mentioned earlier, I encourage you to make those transitional cues as well between stations. Those will make a huge difference. I would encourage you to do them at every station as well, like between every station. So 5 more dribbles and we're going to move to the next one, 3 more stickers, we're going to move to the next station. And then the buddy system, which that's exactly what we're doing with you being paired 1-to-1 or 1-to-2. That's what the buddy system is. Just them knowing they have someone to go through this with reduces a lot of stress and anxiety. If they were going through this alone and just going from station to station in this brand new environment where they don't know anyone, but just knowing that they have someone to go through this with reduces a lot of the stress and just takes a lot of that newness away from the situation. So that helps a lot with the stress and nervousness of it all. And then this last bullet point, this first then language, is very important as well, especially if you find yourself stuck in a situation where a child doesn't want to do something. So for example, washing hands. From my experience, some kiddos, they hate washing their hands. I don't know if some of it is the feeling of the water, or just, they immediately want to get onto the food part, which I understand. They just want to eat. But so if a child doesn't want to wash their hands, they just want to eat, and they are getting frustrated, getting upset, one strategy you can use is this first then language. So you could tell them, okay, first we need to wash our hands and then we can eat. It kind of tells them and prepares them that, okay, first I need to do this undesired task of washing my hands. Yes, I don't want to do it, but then I get to do my desired task of eating. It just lets them know that this undesired task of washing my hands isn't going to last forever. And then I can then engage in my desired task of eating, which is what I want to do. So first I need to do this, and then I can do what I want to do. So it's kind of like first work, then play almost. Any questions on anything so far? I know this is a lot of content. When I was preparing this, I was trying to decide what information to include, what not to include. I feel like there's so much to talk about with kiddos with special needs, and it's hard to fit it all in 2 hours.
Mhm.
Any questions? Are we good? Okay. So, what to do if challenging behaviors do occur? Okay, so the primary goal is to prevent danger from happening. That is our number one goal. We do not want anybody to get hurt. We do not want the child engaging in the behavior to get hurt or anybody surrounding it. You, other children, anybody at all. So the first thing to do is create a distance between the child engaging in the behavior and everybody around. So if you're in the large room, the celebration hall, and a child happens to, maybe they get to the floor and they just refuse to move, or they just start banging their fist on the wall, or any kind of behavior like that, I would, since you're in the large room, I would just have everyone else move away. That would be the best case scenario. Just create distance between you and everyone else in the area. And then the other thing to do would be to seek help from another adult, which, similar to the running situation, shouldn't be any problem at all, since we're all going to be in that large area where there's going to be a lot of other eyes involved in the area. So another person should be there to help. And if for some reason you're in the hallway, you're walking to the bathroom, and there's not a person right there immediately, yell for help. And in order to help the child regain control over their emotions and their situation, we need to, again, try to think about triggers, what may be causing this, the why, what's going on, and analyze their sensory systems. And again, all of that goes back to that cheat sheet. So all of you guys, I'm going to encourage you to keep that in your back pocket. So I think it'd be beneficial for you guys to keep the schedule and that cheat sheet in your back pocket during the respite night. So if this situation were to occur and that you have the child isolated and no one else is around besides another volunteer there to help you, so you have two adults there with you, I would pull out that cheat sheet and try to look at any triggers, see what sensory systems may be disruptive, and then provide that child with that sensory information that they need. Maybe their auditory system tends to be disruptive, so maybe they need headphones, so we could get them a pair of headphones. Or if they are capable, maybe try to move them to the sensory room to calm down, and maybe they could lay on a beanbag to kind of calm down, de-escalate, and just get away from the overwhelming environment in the large room. And once you have ensured that the child is safe and you have provided them with any sensory tools and had a chance for their sensory systems to be balanced after they were disruptive, it's beneficial to not really talk to the child or engage in conversation with them, because we don't want to reinforce any inappropriate behavior, especially if they are continuing to engage in that behavior. Because once they're safe, once you have provided them with the sensory information and tools that they need, if they continue to engage in that behavior, they may be doing it just to receive attention or to continue escaping something that they do not want to do. So we just want to stay calm, not really engage in conversation with them. If you do engage in conversation with them, I would encourage your conversation to not be focused on the negative behavior that they were engaging in, but be focused on the positive behavior and what they should be doing. So instead of saying, oh, you like talking about, oh, you were screaming or you were banging your arm on the wall, I would say, oh, I really liked how Haley was being so quiet in the room. Or for example, if a child took a toy from a kid in the large room, instead of saying, because we want to focus on positive behavior, instead of saying, oh, you shouldn't take toys from your friend, you could say, oh, how about we share our toys with our friend? So we don't want to focus on the negative behavior that they are doing. We want to focus on the positive behavior that they should be doing. So you're redirecting the attention to the positive appropriate behavior. And we don't ever want to use physical restraints during respite night. This will not be used at all. during the evening. We need to try to use these behavior modification techniques that I've talked about and really try to focus on preventing the challenging behaviors from occurring. And if a challenging behavior does occur, come find me immediately, and I will try to assist you with that situation. And it's also important as a volunteer to remain calm during the situation, because the kiddos can tell when we are stressed, overwhelmed, and tense, and they just know when we are feeling that way, and that often leads to an escalation of the behavior. So we need to calm, cool, and collected. That's what we need to be. So here is an example, which I already showed, with the volunteer and child match. I'm not really going to go into too much information on this slide because I already talked about this, but if you guys between now and the respite night have any questions on any information about your child, please feel free to ask me, or if you would like any additional information on them, I would be happy to reach out to their caregiver and get that for you. But I just included their disability type, any dietary needs, medication needs, their assist levels that they need with feeding, eating, communication, toileting, and triggers and sensory needs. Grant, both of your kiddos have dietary needs, the gluten allergy and a dairy allergy. So it's just important to make sure that you look at those when you go through the line. They can't have the cheese or the pretzels. And I'm pretty sure they're going to be able to have the popcorn because I'm going to make sure that I get the correct popcorn. But if for some reason I can't, if for some reason I can only get popcorn that they're unable to have, I will let you know that they can't have that popcorn.
You cut out there. Sorry, you cut out before you started talking about popcorn.
Oh, I said that I'm gonna try to get popcorn that they are able to have, but if for some reason the popcorn that I get they aren't able to have, I will let you know.
It cut out again. I'm sorry. You can just type it or something.
The
You
popcorn
can just move on.
the popcorn that I get, they should be able to have, but if for some reason they can't have it, I'll let you know.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
Yep, no problem. Okay, so this is just, I just wanted to provide a little bit of knowledge on exactly the purpose of this respite program and how it's going to benefit not only the caregivers, but also the kiddos with special needs. So when I was first developing this, I talked with the church and they thought it would be a great asset to the families that attend their church and also the greater Noblesville community as a whole, because the caregivers would be provided with a night free of caregiving responsibilities, because not only their child with a disability can come and attend this, but also siblings are welcome as well. So they can drop off their kiddo and then they can have a night free to tend to their own needs, or have a date night, or just go home and relax, because I'm sure that that does not happen too often, and they can just enjoy their night to themselves. And research shows that caregivers often sacrifice their own needs and they put the needs of their child first, which leads to caregiver anxiety, caregiver stress, and caregiver burden, which then decreases overall caregiver psychological well-being. So through this respite program, we want to do the exact opposite. We want to reduce caregiver stress, reduce caregiver anxiety, and reduce caregiver burden, and then improve caregiver psychological well-being. And it was actually really interesting. I sent out a survey to the caregivers that are participating in this program, and all of them but one scored in the category of moderate to severe burden, caregiver burden, which it was unfortunate to see that they were carrying that much burden through their daily life due to the caregiving responsibilities of their child. But it just shows how much of a need there is for the caregivers, and how much of a need there is for this program. So I'm very excited to implement this program and just see how it can benefit the caregivers and their caregiver burden that they have. And not only are the caregivers going to benefit, but meanwhile, back at the church, the kiddos are going to be engaging in activities that benefit their social skills, their fine motor skills and their gross motor skills. So everybody is going to be benefiting from this program. And then us as volunteers, we're going to be having fun. We're going to be meeting new people. So it's just all around going to be an amazing and fun night. So thank you guys again. I'm super excited. Okay, COVID, the thing that everybody is talking about. It's all over the news, it's everywhere. So the COVID guidelines are going to be super important for us to follow in order for this night to be successful. We're going to be following the most updated CDC guidelines because our number one priority is the health and safety of everyone in attendance, whether it's you guys, the children, and the staff that's going to be there. So number one thing is if you aren't feeling well, I encourage you to stay home. I will be bummed that you're not going to be there and you're not going to be mashed with your kiddo, but I do not want you to put your own health at risk, and I don't want you to put other people at risk as well, because some of these kiddos are at a higher risk than you and I due to their diagnosis and their condition. So again, if you are sick, please stay home. And volunteers and children, you guys will get hand sanitizer immediately when you arrive. There's going to be a table out front. We will all put it on. And I also think it would be best if you guys all brought a pocket hand sanitizer and just kept it in your back pocket during the night and just applied that for you and your child multiple times during the respite night, just to keep everybody safe and just make sure all of our hands are cleaned, and that can just slide in your back pocket. And all the toys and activities and equipment will be clean when you arrive. And then we're also going to clean them after every child uses them. So if you clean them after you use them, that would be great. So then that way, when you move to a new station, you know that when you arrive there, everything's clean and ready to go. And we're also going to be wearing masks over our nose and our mouth. We will have surgical masks that you guys can use there, but cloth masks are fine too. You don't have to double mask, but you can if you want. And if you do double mask, the CDC says that it's most effective if you do the surgical mask first and then the cloth mask over the surgical mask. And we will be maintaining a 6-foot distance between everybody. That's between all volunteers, all staff, and between volunteers and children. And I do recognize that that may be broken at some points during the night if your child needs help washing their hands during some activities, opening their snack. Those are just some examples, but we want to try to maintain that 6-foot distance as much as possible. And it also could be broken if an emergency situation were to occur. Any questions on COVID guidelines or anything of that nature? Okay, you guys are an easy crowd. Okay, the schedule. This is what I emailed you guys, and I will also be providing a hard copy when you guys arrive. I am going to ask if you guys could please arrive at 5:30 on the respite night, just because I am expecting some children to probably arrive at 5:45, just because maybe the parents think, okay, my respite starts at 6. I want to be home. I want to have 3 hours of respite. So I want to be prepared for kiddos to start arriving at 5:45. And since this training is conducted via Zoom, I'm unable to show you the rooms that we're going to be in and explain a few other details as I would if we were in person. So if you could please arrive at 5:30 on March 6th, that would be wonderful. So I can provide you a mini tour. And when you guys arrive, you guys will all sign in, use the hand sanitizer. You're going to get a superhero cape as well, because it's superhero themed. And I ask that you park and enter through door 7. We're going to have door 7 just be the enter and exit point for everybody, just to keep it safe. That way everybody knows where to come in, go out. And 5:45, between 5:45 and 6, the kiddos will arrive. Parents will bring them in, and they're going to get a name tag, a superhero sticker, and a superhero cape. You guys will also be wearing name tags as well. And then you guys will be stationed in a separate room to the side. That way we're not all bombarding the kiddos when they walk in. And then I will bring the child to you, introduce them to you. And then from 6 to 7:15 is when you guys are free to float from station to station in the large celebration hall. And then from 7:15 to 7:20, we will wash our hands and go through the snack line. The snack line is connected from directly from the sink in the kitchen. That's where we're going to wash our hands in the kitchen. And you guys are going to be provided a snack as well as the kiddos. And the snack consists of they're all prepackaged items: popcorn, pretzels, applesauce, and string cheese. So if you feel like you need a little more than that, feel free to bring a lunchbox with anything that you want in it, because we're encouraging the kiddos to do that as well, just to reduce the amount of handling of food items that's going to be going on. And then we're all going to be sitting at tables. So I have some church staff members who, while you guys are washing your hands and getting all the snack items, are going to be doing a room change in the large room and going to be setting up tables. And if you just have one kiddo, you and your child will be sitting on opposite ends of the table. They're about a 6 foot distance table, so that works perfect. You guys will be sitting on opposite ends. If you have 2 children assigned to you, the 2 kiddos will be sitting on opposite ends of the table, and you will be seated at a separate table, back away from it. And I just ask that you keep your back to your table. That way you're facing the kiddos. And you could reach back and grab your snack and then keep facing the kiddos. So from 7:20 to 7:45, we'll all eat our snack at the table while watching a movie. It's a superhero movie. And then once everybody's finished eating, you can throw your trash away in the room, and then the children will be free to either stay seated at the table or they can move to the floor and continue watching the movie. And when we're engaging in the activities, we will have a big, large room. But once we're watching the movie, the room's going to be split in half, just to reduce the amount of space that the children have, just kind of to reduce some of the running that could occur. It just provides a safer environment. And then after the movie at 8:45, that's when we prepare for dismissal. I ask that all the kids get hand sanitizer once more before leaving. And I'm going to have 2 forms. They're kind of exit surveys to help part of program development. Since this is a new program we're developing, I want to help make it as best as possible for the second night that's going to be happening. There's 2 forms. One is for the child to complete, which I'm going to need you to help complete that for them. It's basically going to be you asking them questions and maybe them pointing, or if they do have verbal communication, they will be able to verbally communicate with you. I ask that you have them or complete that form with them first due to time. And then if you have time to complete your form second, that would be great. And if you don't have time to complete yours right away, because we need to get the children's coats on them. And the coats are going to be located near the entrance. So we'll go get the child's coats. And then we're going to come back into the main room because I don't want the children lingering in the hallway. And I will be in the main hallway with a microphone, kind of yelling out children's names as their parents arrive. And then you can walk out the child to their parents and introduce yourselves and tell them that you were the one who was working with them and hanging out with them that night. And then if you didn't complete your form, if you would be willing to stay 5 minutes after and complete your form, I would really appreciate it. It just helps me better prepare this program and make it as best as possible. And then at 9, children leave, you leave, and hopefully everyone leaves with a smile on their face. And then these are some of the stations that we have. We're going to have a dancing and a music station. You could do some freeze dance with this, where the children dance, you pause the music, and they freeze. You could do Simon Says. Marilyn, thank you. She's going to have a drum set station. Where she's teaching the kiddos how to play the drums. The way this is going to work is every volunteer and every kiddo is going to have a drum, and we're going to keep this separated by putting Post-it notes on the drums. That way we don't have to clean each drum every time. And so if you go to that station, you will just pull out your drum and your child's drum and you'll play on it. And then when you're done playing with that, you'll move your drum to the side. And there's also going to be a free music playing station with some maracas, some like a bell, some smaller drums, and those would all need to be cleaned with a Clorox wipe after. And again, especially at the music stations, we want to keep only about 2 groups to those, just because we want to try to avoid overstimulation. A quiet room, I already talked about that. A yoga station, we're going to have cards with yoga poses and some laminated cards with animal figures on them, and you could flip them over, and some of them say crawl like a crab or jump like a frog, and the child could act those out. And those are all laminated and would need to be cleaned with a Clorox wipe. We're having a variety of physical activity stations, jumping over pool noodles and landing on superhero pictures, hula hoops. You could roll, bounce, or pass soccer balls, basketballs, and some dancing ribbons that you wave. And all of those would need to be cleaned with Clorox wipes. And you are all going to be provided a Ziploc bag with some Clorox wipes in it. And I encourage you to just keep those in your pocket as well. And if at any point in time you need more Clorox wipes, just come find me during the respite night and I will provide you with those. And there will also be a table in the middle of respite night with more Clorox wipes and Lysol spray if you need those as well. We're going to have some large outdoor type games. We're having a Spider-Man beanbag toss right here. If you can see my mouse waving over that. If your child does tolerate latex gloves, I would encourage you to try to get them to wear those when throwing the beanbags. That would make it easier to clean those beanbags. If not, we can spray those with Lysol. And we're having a tic-tac-toe lawn game, ring toss, throwing parachute men. And there's also going to be a game station at a table with Connect 4, Treble, Jenga. Those would all need to be cleaned with Clorox. A parachute, it's going to be like a large parachute that you can shake in the air. There need to be about 4 people for this to function, and you just keep a beanbag in the middle or a large blow-up beach ball. And latex gloves would work best for this as well. If not, I would just Clorox where your child was touching. We're going to have a bingo station, and you can kind of see the superhero bingo card down here. We have higher functioning cards, which are of words, and lower functioning, which are going to have pictures. Those are all laminated, so I would Clorox those as well. The craft is build your own shield using stickers, markers, and crayons. And for the markers and crayons, I would, instead of giving them a large tub, I would just give them like 5 markers. That would just reduce the amount of cleaning you have to do. And we're going to have Legos, building blocks, which those would all need to be cleaned. And then a social skills station, which are just laminated social skills activities and games that help the children improve their social skills. And some of the social skills relate to asking for help, identifying positive and negative behaviors, turn taking, identifying emotions, and so forth. Does anybody have any questions on the activities? There's a reminder about the official tour. Okay, any questions at all? Okay, I'm running through my mind thinking if there's any last minute things I need to tell you. Okay, here's a last final reminder slide. So if you guys could come at 5:30 for the tour. And then we're going to enter through door 7. And then here's just a list of what to bring for the respite night. So that pocket hand sanitizer I was talking about, that would be beneficial for both you and the kiddo to just use multiple times throughout the respite night. And then a mask. We will have the surgical ones if you would like to use that. Your cheat sheet of the child. I'm going to provide you a hard copy. So you really don't need to bring that, but I just encourage you to look over it and become familiar with it. That'll just increase your comfort levels come respite night, so you're more aware of the triggers and your child's sensory systems. And then I also emailed you the schedule and the list of stations, which again, I'm going to provide you a hard copy of that. And then I encourage you to wear tennis shoes because you're going to be moving from station to station. And in case you have a child that does engage in running, and then also jeans with pockets because you're going to have some things in your pockets with the schedules, the cheat sheet, the bag of Clorox wipes, the hand sanitizer, and if your child gives you anything else to hold. But it should all fit in your pockets just fine. And then last but not least, a smile on your face. Training session, and I hope everybody gained a little bit out of it tonight and feels a little more comfortable going into respite night on exactly what the night's going to entail and feels more comfortable interacting with children with special needs and is looking forward to everything that's going to happen on March 6th.